Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Daily Devotional. So I'm using a different microphone today. It's a new microphone that I was able to find on a Black Friday deal. So hopefully it's working okay. Y'all let me know if there are any issues with it. Hopefully it'll be a little bit, maybe even better than the one I had before. So the daily devotional today is going to come from an article that was actually posted yesterday. And the article itself, it's not really political so much, but there's a point that I want to make in it that is being mentioned. So the title of the article is "Omar Mocked After Misspelling Book of Bible While Attempting to School Rubio on Faith." So, Omar faced a wave of backlash on Wednesday after she attempted to school Senator Marco Rubio on the Bible. The issue arose after Rubio criticized Georgia Senate candidate Raphael Warnock for claiming that one couldn't serve both God and the military. In response to Rubio's criticism, Omar posted a verse from the Gospel of Matthew, both misspelling Matthew and, others alleged, misinterpreting Jesus' words. Matthew's 6:24, she tweeted along with an embarrassed face emoji. "No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and the money." The lies and smears of the GOP have no boundaries, but this is a disgrace and shameful. In another tweet she followed, "The point here is that as a Muslim, I know that Reverend Warnock is quoting scripture in his sermon here, so I am sure Rubio does too, but he is willing to lie and make a mockery of himself." Twitter users poked fun at her spelling and critiqued the way she interpreted the verse. Omar was referring to Matthew 6:24, which in the Revised Standard Version reads, "No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon." Mammon refers to an idol representing materialism or concern for wealth. The verse is typically interpreted as a warning against idolatry or worshiping something other than God. During his 2011 sermon, Warnock appeared to associate mammon with the military. "America, nobody can serve God in the military," Warnock said at the time. "You cannot serve God and money. You cannot serve God and mammon at the same time. America, choose ye this day who you will serve. Choose ye this day." Mid-criticism, Warnock's campaign argued his remarks were taken out of context. This sermon is based on a biblical verse that reads, "No man can serve two masters, you cannot serve God and mammon," a biblical term for wealth. Reverend Warnock was speaking about the need to commit to moral life before pursuing other priorities. So, obviously, it kind of has somewhat of a political charged underlie there to this article. But first thing I want to address is, yes, so Omar misspelled Matthew, okay? But first of all, she's Muslim, okay? So she probably doesn't know the Bible very well. So making fun of her for misspelling the book of Matthew seems to be a little, I don't know. To me, it's just a little petty. But regardless, the point or the part of this that I'm wanting to stress though is really has nothing to do with Omar. She's just repeating what she heard from Mr. Warnock. It's this passage, Matthew 6:24, that I want to focus on, and for that, even not so much the passage itself, but the idea of appreciating context. So going to Matthew chapter 6 and in verse 24. Oops. Messed up my thing here. Hold on a second. There we go. Matthew 6 and in verse 24. So starting in verse 19. So Jesus says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The lamp of the body is the eye. If therefore the eye is good, your whole body will be full of light." Which is to say, if what you are looking at, what you desire, is good. But if your eye is bad, the whole body will be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will be loyal to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon here. Sometimes this is it's translated to say you cannot serve God and man. And certainly there is a component to that. That's true. But as was mentioned before, mammon does carry with it the idea of personal desire, of desire for wealth, or desire for things other than God, really is kind of what's being represented there. And so while what Warnock specifically says, nobody can serve God and the military, and then he associates that with Matthew 6 verse 24. And I understand as it's being clarified here, the need to commit to moral life before pursuing other priorities. I understand, I get that, and generally I agree with that statement. But there's, while it is difficult, okay, I will say it is difficult to serve in the military and be a faithful Christian. It's not impossible. I've known many Christians who have done it. Like I said, it can be difficult. I've known several Christians who've been in the military who were positioned overseas, and there was either just a very, very small church or no church at all, and they just had to kind of host a worship in their home. And you know, it can be very difficult, but like I said, it's not impossible. And for that, you got to keep in mind context has to harmonize with the rest of Scripture. And we know that Cornelius in Acts chapter 10 was a Roman centurion, and he wasn't condemned by Peter or anyone else for being a Roman centurion. And so it seems to be a little bit, it's cherry picking ultimately. You pick a verse. It starts with okay, I have this idea in my head that I want to talk about. I want to talk about how, in this case, it would seem that Warnock wanted to talk about how people can't serve in the military, Christians can't serve in the military. So then you go through different verses, and then you find a verse that you can use to kind of support that thought process. Anytime you go through Scripture with a preconceived idea, or predetermined idea, I should say, and you're looking for proof text to support your idea, okay, you're going to find it. I knew a preacher one time years ago who he was making this very same point in his sermon, and he was a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, and he went through Old Testament Scripture and found a verse that, if you look at it from a certain perspective, would seem to support that if you're not a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, then you can't be saved. You can't go to heaven. And he was doing, it was kind of a silly example, but it was an example to show that anyone, if you have a predetermined idea about something, you go through Scripture trying to find a proof text, you will find a Scripture that you can twist and that you can misinterpret and make it seem as though it's supporting your thought. And unfortunately, people tend to do this in an effort to justify something they already believe in or they already want to think. And then they go through Scripture trying to say, well, see, this makes it okay, or this justifies it. Jesus isn't talking about the military. Okay, Jesus is not talking about the Roman army. He's not talking about military. And I believe that it would be less than honest to the context of attempting to make that connection to the military. Having said that, is Jesus emphasizing the need to understand having proper priorities on heaven? Yes, he is. Okay, that's true. You do need to have proper priorities on heaven. He is warning about wealth and the desire for wealth or possessions. And I can even support going so far as anything other than God, beyond wealth, even though mammon does speak to the sense of wealth. Anything going beyond God as my priority in terms of what I set first as my priority would be supported by this thought. However, that's not to say in application that being in the military is sinful. That's not what Jesus is saying in verse 24. Now, again, should I be careful and be aware and be prepared for the challenges that I'll face if I decide to join the military as a Christian? Yes, I need to be prepared for that. And I need to know that it is going to test me, being around certain types of behavior, type of language, the difficulties in finding churches. I need to be prepared for that and be prepared to make sure that I'm still going to worship God on the Lord's day and so forth. I need to be prepared for that. But that's going to be true of any job. I mean, to varying degrees of difficulty, just about any job in our modern world, our modern society, is going to have challenges associated with it for the Christian. And we have to take care of our families, we have to provide for them and so forth. So there are going to be demands on our time and on our focus. That doesn't mean to say that I can't still have the priority of serving God. And so what I want to gain from this article isn't really what Omar says. Okay, it's not what she is saying. She's just really kind of going along with what Warnock is saying. She doesn't really know any better. So and to make fun of her for it, I think is it's political. Let's just face it. It's political. It's not spiritual, and people who are spiritual, I don't think, should make fun of somebody for something like that. The need is to correct and make somebody aware that this is actually what the scripture says. And if Warnock was being misquoted or was being misrepresented in what he said, then certainly that needs to be addressed. But what he says is, okay, what he says is, nobody can serve God in the military. That's not true. I don't believe that. I believe that Cornelius served God and the military. In fact, even before he was taught the gospel, he was certainly having a priority on worshiping Jehovah. Okay, we can see that he was devout. He was referred to as one who feared God with all his household. I mean, he certainly had a priority on Jehovah even before Peter came and preached to him the word. So just because he was in the military did not mean he couldn't have a priority on God. And so to make that application it's not supported by the context. Now, if is it true that we need to commit to a spiritual, I'm not going to say moral life, a spiritual life before pursuing other priorities? Well, yeah, if we hope to be faithful people, if we hope to be if we hope to go to heaven one day, then yeah, we have to have the priority of serving God first and foremost in our lives, no matter what our job is, no matter what the means is by which we support our families. It needs to first be we serve God. Okay, that's true. But in application or practical purpose, trying to connect serving the military in some form or fashion to not being able to worship God, that's not the context. And we just have to be very careful, not only for ourselves, but to be aware of others as well when they attempt to find a proof text for something they already believe. And we have to be cautious against doing that. When we go through Scripture attempting to look for a reason to support a belief we already have, for vindication or for justification in something we already want to believe, that is a telltale sign that I'm not going to be honest and true with context. Okay, I'm biased in my interpretation of Scripture if I'm already looking at what I want to believe as opposed to what the Scriptures say. And we have to be very, very careful. Preachers have to be very careful about that. You've got an idea for a sermon, and then you go through Scripture and you look for something to support the idea you already have. And what happens is, technically speaking, I mean, it would be a topical sermon, but what I have seen happen sometimes is that you take a Scripture that may have nothing to do with your point, but it may mention something in passing, and then you make a big deal about this scripture saying this thing when the scripture has nothing to do with the point. And I've seen that happen. And it's a disservice to scripture, and it's a disservice to people who are hearing, that, because what happens is they then associate some random idea with that verse when in fact the context of that verse has nothing to do with whatever the point is. And we just have to be very careful when we talk to friends and neighbors, when we mention scripture maybe in the context of a conversation. Let's make sure that the context of the scripture fits the context of the discussion, not just try to use a proof text or cherry pick a verse to kind of support what we believe or what we think. All right, so that's the daily devotional for you today. I hope that's something that'll kind of help us as we talk to people and as we seek to serve God. So the next daily devotional will be tomorrow at 6:30. Lord willing, I'll see you all then. Thanks, everybody.